A veteran Navy SEAL came to the forest to leave his past behind. But his dog suddenly stopped, staring into the trees like it sensed something waiting. No sound, no warning. Just a pull that couldn't be ignored. Step by step, they followed it deeper, into a place no map seemed to remember. Until the trees opened, and an abandoned chapel stood there, broken but not forgotten. His dog refused to go inside, as if it had been there before. Where are you watching from, and would you step inside? Don't forget to like and subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories. A man once trained to never leave anyone behind had done exactly that. The memory did not come like a storm. It came quietly, like breath fogging against cold glass. Thane Wilder stood on the edge of the gravel road as morning light spilled over the northern forest, pale gold and soft, filtering through tall pines and white-barked birch. The world looked gentle here, too gentle, as if nothing terrible had ever happened beneath those trees. He knew better. At 43, Thane carried himself like a man who had long ago stopped needing to prove anything. He stood tall, just over 6 feet, with broad shoulders shaped by years of disciplined training. His frame was lean but powerful, the kind of strength that didn't announce itself unless needed. His face was angular, jaw sharp, with a permanent shadow of stubble along his cheeks. His blue-gray eyes were steady, watchful, and tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. His hair was cut short, dark brown, military neat. At his temples, strands of silver had already begun to claim their ground. He wore the same thing he always wore, an olive field jacket, faded just enough to tell a story, over a red and dark blue plaid shirt. Dark cargo pants, worn brown leather boots, a military watch scratched from years of use, a pocket knife clipped to his side, and on his back, an Eberle stock half-track backpack. Old, reliable, like the rest of him. Beside him stood Ash. The German shepherd was still as stone, 5, maybe 6 years old. Black and tan coat, dense and clean, muscles tight beneath the surface. Ash wasn't large for his breed, but there was something about the way he stood, balanced, grounded, that made him seem immovable. His ears were upright, alert, his eyes deep and dark, fixed on something far beyond what most men could notice. Ash did not fidget, did not bark. He simply watched. "Yeah," Thane muttered under his breath, adjusting the strap of his pack. "I see it too." But he didn't. Not yet. Bright Hollow was not the kind of town people moved to. It was the kind they ended up in. A scattering of wooden buildings along a narrow road, framed by forest on all sides. No traffic lights, no urgency. Just a quiet that pressed gently against your ears until you realized how loud the rest of the world had been, and how much you missed it. Or didn't. Thane drove slowly past the general store, its faded sign creaking slightly in the breeze. A couple of locals stood outside, speaking in low voices. They glanced at him. Not unfriendly, but not welcoming either. Just aware. New things were noticed here, especially men who looked like they'd come from somewhere harder. He parked near the edge of town and stepped out. Ash followed without needing a command, falling into place beside him like he always had. They moved together with the ease of something practiced over years. Not just obedience, but trust. Inside the general store, the air smelled of old wood and coffee. Behind the counter stood a man in his late 70s. Tall once, but now slightly stooped. His hair was silver, combed neatly back. His face was lined, but not harsh. More like the creases of someone who had spent a long time waiting. Elias Wren. "Morning," Thane said. Elias looked up slowly. His pale blue eyes studied Thane, then dropped briefly to Ash, lingering there a moment longer. "You're the one who bought the cabin by the ridge," Elias said. His voice was soft, steady, not curious, just certain. "That's right." Elias nodded once. "Forest's different up there." Thane gave a faint half-smile. "Different how?" The old man's gaze drifted toward the window, where the trees stood tall and unmoving in the morning light. "Quiet," he said. A pause. "Too quiet." Ash shifted. Just slightly. Not a step. Not a sound. But his posture tightened, ears angling ever so subtly toward the eastern edge of the forest. Elias noticed. His expression changed, barely, but enough. "You keep that dog close," Elias added quietly. "Out east, things don't always stay where they should." Thane held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary, then nodded. "I always do." Later that afternoon, Thane met Mara Bellamy at the ranger station just beyond town. She stepped out onto the wooden porch as his truck rolled in, wiping her hands on the sides of her moss-green parka. She was in her mid-30s, lean and strong, built for movement rather than appearance. Her chestnut-brown hair was tied loosely at the back of her neck, a few strands escaping in the breeze. Her eyes, somewhere between green and brown, were sharp, observant, the kind that noticed details most people stepped over. "You're wilder," she said, not asking. "That obvious?" "You walk like someone who checks corners without thinking." A faint flicker of dry humor crossed his face. "Used to?" She glanced at Ash. "And that's not just a pet." "No," Thane said. "He's not." Ash met her gaze briefly, then looked away, scanning the tree line. Mara noticed that too. "Something got him on edge?" she asked. Thane followed Ash's line of sight. Nothing but trees, light, stillness. "He's been doing that since we got here." Mara crossed her arms, considering. "The eastern forest's got some old ground," she said. "Old paths, old structures. Not all of them marked anymore." "Dangerous?" "Not if you know where you're stepping." A beat. "And if you don't," she added, "you won't know until it's too late." Sheriff Owen Pike found them just as the sun began to dip. He arrived in a dusty truck, boots hitting the ground with a firm, practiced weight. Early 50s, solid build, face like carved stone, square, weathered, unreadable at first glance. His hair was short, brown with streaks of gray, and his eyes carried the kind of constant awareness that never quite turned off. "Wilder," he said, offering a hand. Thane shook it. "Sheriff." Pike's grip was strong, direct. "I like to know who's moving into my town," he said. Not threatening, just honest. "Fair enough." Pike glanced at Ash. "Dogs trained?" "Yes." "Good," Pike said. "Forest's not always what it looks like." Thane almost laughed. "Seems to be a theme around here." Pike didn't smile. That night, Thane sat on the porch of his cabin, the forest stretching out in front of him like a dark ocean. Ash lay nearby, head resting on his paws. For a while, neither of them moved. Then, Ash lifted his head, ears forward, body still. Thane felt it before he understood it. That subtle shift in the air, like something had just leaned closer. Ash stood, turned, faced east, did not move. "Easy," Thane said softly. But Ash wasn't tense. He was focused, as if listening to something far away, something Thane could not hear. The next morning, Ash didn't wait. The moment Thane stepped outside, the dog moved, fast, controlled, pulling just enough on the lead to guide, not drag. "All right," Thane muttered. "You've got something. Let's see it." They entered the forest. Sunlight filtered through the trees in long golden beams. The ground was soft with moss and fallen needles. It was beautiful. Too beautiful. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind, just their footsteps, and Ash, moving with purpose now. Then he stopped. Ahead of them, through a break in the trees, something rose out of the forest floor. Stone, dark, weathered, half swallowed by time. A small Gothic structure, arched windows shattered, vines crawling over its walls, the roof sagging but still holding. Light poured through broken stained glass, casting faint colors across the ground like forgotten memories. A chapel. Abandoned. Thane stepped closer, boots crunching softly over gravel and old leaves. Ash did not follow. Ash didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't retreat. He stood at the threshold of the chapel and refused to go in. Not out of fear, out of recognition. Thane frowned slightly, glancing back. "You've been through worse than this," he said quietly. Ash didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the doorway, as if something inside had already happened and wasn't finished. Thane turned back to the chapel. The wooden door hung partially open, creaking faintly as the breeze touched it. He pushed it wider. Inside, the air was still. Dust lay thick across the floor, undisturbed for years. Or so it seemed. Rows of broken pews lined the room. A tilted cross stood at the far end, half covered in shadow. Colored light filtered through shattered glass, painting the interior in faint reds and blues. Thane took one step inside, then another. His gaze dropped to the ground and stilled, because in the dust, clear as if they had been made minutes ago, were footprints, small, uneven, leading deeper into the chapel, fresh. Thane didn't speak. Behind him, Ash let out a low, almost inaudible breath. Not a warning. Not yet. But something close. Something that said, this wasn't over. The footprints did not belong to the past. Thane stood just inside the abandoned chapel, his eyes fixed on the small impressions pressed into the dust. They were uneven, slightly staggered, like a child who had walked carefully, unsure of where to place each step. Not running, not playing, walking, with purpose. Behind him, Ash remained at the doorway, still, watching. The morning light filtered through shattered stained glass, scattering broken colors across the wooden floor. Reds, blues, gold, all fractured, all incomplete, like something that had once meant more than it did now. Thane crouched slowly. He didn't touch the prints, didn't disturb them, just studied, fresh, no more than a day old. He straightened, his jaw tightening slightly. "This isn't old," he said quietly. Mara stepped in beside him. Up close, the chapel felt smaller than it had from the outside. The air inside was stale, unmoving. The wooden floor beneath their boots creaked faintly, a hollow sound that echoed longer than it should. Mara tilted her head, listening. "You hear that?" she asked. Thane nodded. Hollow. She stepped forward, testing the boards with the heel of her boot. Each step produced a soft, uneven thud, some solid, others faintly empty beneath. "This place has layers," she murmured. Her eyes moved across the interior, absorbing details quickly. The collapsed pews, the tilted cross at the far end, the walls where time had peeled away paint and meaning alike. Ash finally moved. One slow step inside, then another. His posture was different now. Lower, more deliberate. His nose hovered just above the floor, tracing something invisible. "Easy," Thane said. Ash didn't respond. He had already found something. They followed the trail together. Near one of the broken pews, Mara knelt and picked something up between her fingers. A small, crinkled wrapper. Bright color against the dust. "Candy," she said. "Recent." Thane scanned the area. A few feet away, something else caught his eye. A thread. He stepped closer, crouching again. A fragment of fabric, blue-gray wool caught on a splintered edge of wood. Torn clean, not weathered. "Clothing," he said. Mara nodded slowly. Kid-sized. The silence in the chapel deepened. Not empty, heavy, like the space itself remembered something. Ash stopped again, this time near the center of the chapel. He lowered his head, sniffing intensely. Then, without warning, he began to paw at the floor. Sharp, focused, repetitive. "Hey!" Thane stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on Ash's harness. "What is it?" Ash didn't stop. The wood beneath his paws gave off that same hollow tone, only louder now. Mara moved closer, crouching beside them. She pressed her palm flat against the boards, her brow furrowed. "There's space under here." Thane exhaled slowly. "Help me." It took effort. The wood was old, but stubborn. Using his knife, Thane pried at the edge of one of the planks Ash had scratched loose. The board lifted with a splintering crack, releasing a breath of stale, trapped air. Dust rose. Beneath it, darkness, not deep, but hidden. Mara leaned in, shining a small flashlight into the opening. "There's a cavity," she said. "Not natural." Thane widened the gap, pulling up another section. Inside, wrapped in decaying cloth, lay a small bundle. He reached in carefully, lifting it out. The fabric disintegrated slightly in his hands. Inside, a thin leather-bound book, a handful of black and white photographs, and something small, circular, worn smooth by time, a child's bracelet. Mara's breath caught. Thane opened the book. The pages were fragile, edges curled and yellowed. Ink faded, but still legible in places. Names, dates, short entries, a record of something that had once mattered enough to be written down. Then, near the middle of the book, a line, repeated, over and over, in slightly different handwriting, as if more than one person had written it. Or the same person many times, trying to make sense of it. When the bell stopped, the child followed the light. The words seemed to sit heavier than they should. Not a sentence, a warning, or a memory. Mara looked up slowly. "There was a bell here," she said, glancing toward the broken tower above. "Old chapels like this always had one." Thane followed her gaze. The structure above was partially collapsed. Whatever had once hung there was gone, or had fallen. "Stopped ringing," he said quietly. Mara nodded. And then something changed. Ash let out a low sound. Not a bark, not a growl. A breath pulled through tension. His body stiffened again, but this time not toward the floor. Toward the forest. Beyond the chapel walls. Before Thane could respond, a voice cut through the silence. "Thane!" They turned. Sheriff Owen Pike stood just outside the doorway, his silhouette framed by the pale daylight. His expression was different now. Not the measured calm from before. Tighter, urgent. Thane stepped out to meet him. "What is it?" Pike ran a hand over his jaw, exhaling once. "We've got a situation." The town had changed, subtly, but enough. When they returned, The stillness felt different, less like peace, more like something waiting. A woman stood outside the sheriff's office, arms wrapped around herself. She was in her mid-30s, pale, with dark hair pulled back hastily. Her eyes were red, unfocused, as if sleep had been replaced by fear. "Lena Bell," Pike said quietly. "Noah's mother." Her gaze snapped to Thane, then to Ash. "You're the one with the dog," she said, her voice trembling just enough to betray how tightly she was holding herself together. "Yes, ma'am," Thane said gently. She stepped closer. "My son," her breath hitched. "He didn't come home yesterday. He went out toward the trails. He always does that, but," she swallowed, "he always comes back." Ash shifted beside Thane. Not forward, not away, just aware. Lena knelt suddenly in front of him, her hands hovering, unsure whether to touch. "Can he find him?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Please tell me he can find him." Thane met her eyes. There was something fragile there, something familiar. "I'll do everything I can," he said. He didn't promise. Not again. Later, as the search teams prepared, Thane stood at the edge of the forest. Ash was already facing east. The same direction, the same stillness, the same pull. Mara stepped up beside him. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" she asked. Thane didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. They both knew. He looked down at Ash. The dog's muscles were tight. Not with fear, with certainty. Back at the chapel, the light had shifted. Longer shadows now, cooler air. Ash walked straight inside this time, but only for a few steps. Then he stopped, turned, and faced the forest again. The leash went taut in Thane's hand. A firm pull, not frantic, directed, insistent. Thane followed the line, beyond the chapel, past the broken fence, into the trees. He glanced back once, at the structure behind them, at the hollow floor, at the place where something had been hidden and found. Then he looked forward, into the forest. Ash moved ahead, not searching anymore, leading. Thane tightened his grip on the leash. His voice was low, almost to himself. "This didn't start here." Ash pulled again, stronger this time, toward something deeper, something waiting, something that had not ended. The forest did not resist them. It welcomed them. That was what made it wrong. Morning light filtered through the tall northern pines, soft and golden, painting the forest floor in long, quiet strokes. Moss glowed faintly underfoot, and the air smelled clean, earth, sap, and something older that lingered beneath it all. But the deeper they walked, the more that calm began to shift. Not disappear, just lean. Thane Wilder moved at the front of the search line, his pace steady, controlled. His posture remained relaxed, but there was a quiet tension in the way his shoulders held, like a man who knew something was off, even if he couldn't yet name it. Ash moved beside him, not behind, never behind. The German shepherd's head was low, nose working in short, focused pulls of air. His black and tan coat caught the sunlight in brief flashes, but his attention remained locked forward. His movements were deliberate, almost economical. No wasted steps. Behind them, Sheriff Owen Pike and Mara Bellamy followed, along with 2 volunteers from town. One of them was a man named Carter Doyle. Mid-40s, broad-shouldered but soft around the edges, like someone who had once been strong and slowly let it go. His beard was thick, uneven, and his eyes carried the kind of fatigue that came from routine, not trauma. He spoke little, but when he did, it was practical. The other was a younger woman, Emily Rook, late 20s, slim, quick on her feet, with sun-freckled skin and short blonde hair tucked behind her ears. She worked at the diner in town, Mara had mentioned. Her expression held a constant tightness, like she was trying not to think too far ahead. They all followed the marked trail at first, until Ash didn't. The dog slowed, then stopped, then turned. Not confused, certain. He pulled slightly to the left, toward a narrow stretch of trees where no trail existed. "Hold on," Carter called from behind. "That's not the route." Mara checked her GPS, then shook her head. He's right. That direction isn't mapped. Thane didn't move immediately. He watched Ash. The dog's ears were forward. His body leaned. Not aggressively, not nervously, but with intent. He wasn't reacting. He was choosing. Thane exhaled slowly. "We're not following the trail," he said. Pike frowned. "You're trusting the dog over the map?" Thane glanced at him. Yes. There was no arrogance in it. Just certainty. The forest shifted almost immediately once they left the trail. The light was still there, but thinner now, broken more often by thicker branches and denser undergrowth. The ground changed too. Less soft moss, more exposed roots, more uneven terrain. Emily stumbled slightly, catching herself on a low branch. "This doesn't feel like a place people walk through," she muttered. Mara didn't answer. She was watching the trees. "Look," she said after a moment. Ahead of them, partially hidden by vines and thyme, stood a wooden post. Old, leaning. At first glance, it looked like nothing. But as they got closer, Thane saw the shape carved into it. A marking, faded but deliberate. "Boundary marker," Mara said quietly. "Old one." "For what?" Pike asked. Mara didn't answer right away. Her gaze moved slowly across the surrounding area. "There used to be something here," she said. "A settlement, maybe. Not official. Not recorded properly." Carter shifted uncomfortably. "I've lived here my whole life," he said. "Never heard of anything like that." Mara's eyes stayed on the trees. "That doesn't mean it wasn't there." Ash moved again, faster now. The pull on the leash grew stronger. Thane followed without hesitation. Branches brushed against his jacket. Boots pressed into soft earth. The forest seemed to close in, not aggressively, but with a quiet kind of persistence. Then, the trees opened slightly, and something appeared ahead. A structure. Small. Collapsed. A cabin. It leaned heavily to one side, its wooden frame warped and darkened by years of neglect. The roof had partially caved in, letting sunlight spill through jagged openings. Vines crept along the walls, pulling the structure slowly back into the earth. Ash slowed as they approached. But he didn't stop. Inside, the air was thick. Still. Dust floated in the beams of light, shifting with each movement. Thane stepped carefully across the threshold. His eyes scanned everything at once. Broken furniture, rotting floorboards, a rusted stove in the corner, and a plastic bottle. Modern, half full. Mara picked it up, turning it in her hands. "Water," she said. "Still clear." "Recent," Thane added. Emily's voice came from behind them. "There's something here." She stood near the far wall, holding a piece of paper. Crinkled, slightly torn. Thane walked over, took it gently. It was a drawing. Rough, uneven lines, but clear enough. A building, tall windows, pointed roof. The chapel, no doubt. "He came here," Mara said softly. Thane nodded, but not by accident. His gaze dropped to the lower part of the page. There, drawn in darker strokes, was something else. a shape beneath the building, circular, closed, like a loop. Noah hadn't just drawn the chapel. He had drawn something underneath it. A circle. Hidden. Intentional. Thane felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear, recognition, patterns. He'd seen it before, different place, different context. But the same instinct. Someone wasn't just wandering. They were following something, or being led. "Where did he get this idea?" Pike asked. No one answered, but they were all thinking the same thing. This wasn't random. Back outside, the air felt cooler, the light dimmer. Ash stood near the edge of the clearing, facing deeper into the forest again. Always forward, never back. They returned to town briefly. Elias Wren was waiting. He stood outside the general store, hands folded loosely in front of him. His posture was calm, but his eyes, those pale, quiet eyes, were sharper now. "You went east," he said. It wasn't a question. Thane stepped forward. "We found something." Elias nodded slowly. "I figured you might." Thane held out the drawing. Elias took it. His fingers trembled slightly, not from age, but from something else. Recognition. His eyes moved across the lines, then stopped. At the circle. He inhaled once, deep. "They used to say," Elias began, his voice softer than before, "that the ground out there wasn't stable. Not in the way people think." Thane waited. "There were paths," Elias continued, "not marked, not official. They led between places, old places, before the town was what it is now." He turned, stepping slowly inside the store. "Come," he said. Behind the counter, Elias opened a drawer and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Old, handled many times. He placed it on the counter and unfolded it carefully. A map, hand-drawn, not precise, but detailed. It showed the forest, not as it was now, but as it had been. Clusters of structures, paths connecting them, and one marking a circle, near where the chapel stood. Thane leaned in. "This was here?" he asked. Elias nodded. "A long time ago." "What happened to it?" Elias looked at him, and for the first time, there was something close to sorrow in his expression. People stopped talking about it. Back in the forest, the air felt heavier. Not physically, emotionally. Ash moved faster now, the leash pulled tight in Thane's hand. They passed the cabin. Didn't stop. Deeper. Further than before. The ground changed again. Roots gave way to packed earth. Then to something looser. Disturbed. Ash slowed. Then stopped. In front of them stood a massive tree. Ancient. Its trunk thick and twisted, bark split and scarred by time. But it wasn't the tree that caught Thane's attention. It was the ground beneath it. The roots had been forced upward, exposed, as if something had pushed from below. Ash stepped forward slowly, nose low, breathing shallow, focused. Then he froze, completely. Thane followed his gaze. There, pressed into the soft earth near the roots, were footprints. Small, like before, but not alone. Larger ones stood beside them, deeper, heavier, adult. Thane didn't speak, didn't move. The forest held its breath with him. Ash let out a low sound. Not fear, not warning, something else, something closer to knowing. Thane's voice, when it came, was barely more than a whisper. He wasn't alone. The forest did not forget. It simply waited for the right moment to be remembered. The footprints beneath the old tree lingered in Thane's mind long after they left the clearing. Small ones, and larger ones, together. Not scattered, not chaotic, deliberate. Someone had been there with Noah, or Noah had followed someone. Either way, this was no longer a search for a lost child. It was a search for a choice someone else had made. "Jonah Creed," Mara said as they walked back toward the trucks. Her voice was quieter now, more measured. Thane glanced at her. "You know him?" "Everyone does," she replied. "Or at least, everyone knows of him." "That bad?" Mara shook her head slightly. "Not bad. Just removed." Sheriff Pike stepped in beside them. "He's been living out on the western edge of the forest for years," Pike added. "Keeps to himself, doesn't cause trouble." "Then why haven't I heard about him?" Carter asked from behind. Pike didn't look back. "Because people here don't talk about things they don't understand." The path to Jonah's place was barely a path at all. Narrow, overgrown. It curved through denser woods, where the sunlight thinned into pale strands instead of full beams. The air felt cooler here, heavier, as if it carried more than just the scent of trees. Ash walked ahead. Not pulling this time, just moving with intent. When they reached the clearing, it felt less like arriving somewhere, and more like stepping into a space that had been watching them approach. Jonah Creed's cabin stood low against the earth. Weathered wood, darkened by years of rain and neglect. The structure leaned slightly, as if it had grown tired of standing upright. A thin line of smoke curled from a rusted chimney, barely visible against the gray sky above. The man himself stood outside, waiting. Jonah Creed was 62, but age had settled on him unevenly. His body was lean, almost too lean, as if he had shed everything unnecessary over the years. His shoulders were narrow, but held a quiet strength. His face was long, marked by deep lines that didn't come from laughter. His hair, once dark, had faded into a dull gray, uneven and untrimmed. His eyes were the most unsettling part, not because they were sharp, but because they weren't. They looked tired, not from sleep, from memory. "You're early," Jonah said. His voice was low, rough, like something unused. Thane stepped forward. "We didn't set a time." Jonah gave a faint, humorless smile. "You don't need to. People only come out here for one reason." His gaze shifted briefly to Ash. The dog had stopped several feet behind Thane, still watching. "You've been in the eastern forest," Jonah said. Not a question. Thane nodded. "We found signs of a boy." Jonah's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. A tightening, a recognition. Pike stepped in. "You seen anything? Anyone passing through?" Jonah didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved slowly across each of them, measuring, weighing. Then, "No." The word came out flat, too flat. Ash moved. Just one step, then another, his ears angled toward the back of the cabin. His body lowered slightly, not aggressive, not fearful, focused. Thane noticed. "Something's there," he said quietly. Jonah followed his gaze. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Not surprise, not denial. Something closer to resignation. "You should leave," Jonah said. Mara stepped forward. "We're not here to cause trouble." Jonah let out a slow breath. "That's not what I'm worried about." Silence stretched between them, heavy, uncomfortable. Then Thane spoke. "What happened out there?" he asked. Jonah's eyes snapped back to him. sharp now, alive in a way they hadn't been before. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Jonah turned, walked slowly to the side of the cabin, stopped, didn't look back. "You're asking the wrong question," he said. Thane followed. So did Ash. The others hesitated, then came after. Behind the cabin, the ground sloped slightly downward. The trees grew closer together here, their roots tangled and exposed. The air felt colder, the light thinner. Ash stopped near a patch of earth that looked wrong, disturbed. Not recently, but not untouched either. Jonah stood a few feet away, his hands hanging loosely at his sides. "I was a boy," he said quietly. No one interrupted. "I heard her." The words settled into the space like something that had been waiting to be spoken. "Clara," Jonah continued. "She didn't vanish. Not at first." His voice trembled, just slightly. "I heard her under the ground, crying, calling." Mara's breath caught softly. Pike looked away, Jonah's eyes fixed on the dirt. "I told them. The adults. I told them she was there." His jaw tightened. "They told me to stop. Said I was imagining things." A pause. "They were wrong." Jonah's voice dropped to a whisper. "It wasn't the forest that took her." He swallowed. "It was silence." The air shifted. Not physically, but something inside it changed. "I stood right here," Jonah said, his voice hollow now. "And I listened." His eyes lifted slowly to meet Thane's. "And I did nothing." No one spoke. There was nothing to say. Ash suddenly moved, fast. He stepped forward and began sniffing the ground intensely, circling once, then twice. His paws scraped lightly at the surface, his breathing sharp and focused. Thane dropped beside him. "What is it?" Ash didn't answer. He pressed his nose closer to the earth. Then, he pawed, hard. The soil gave slightly under the pressure. Not solid, not stable. "Help me," Thane said. Mara was already beside him. Together they began clearing the dirt, hands, tools, whatever they could use. The ground broke apart easier than expected. Too easy. A stone edge appeared. Flat. Deliberate. Pike crouched down, brushing away more dirt. "A door," he muttered. They uncovered it slowly. A slab of stone set into the earth. Old, cracked, but intact. Jonah stepped back, further, as if distance could undo what was happening. Thane gripped the edge, pulled. The stone shifted with a heavy grinding sound, then lifted. A dark opening revealed itself beneath. Cool air rushed out. Stale, trapped. Mara shined her light inside. Stone walls, narrow, descending. "A tunnel," she said. Thane dropped down first. Ash followed without hesitation. The others came after. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with dust and something older. The walls were lined with rough stone, uneven but intentional. This had been built, not carved by nature. They moved carefully, step by step. At the end of the short passage, the space opened slightly. A small chamber, low ceiling, bare, except for boxes, old, stacked unevenly. Thane opened one. Inside, papers, dozens of them, maps, documents, names, records of land ownership, dates that went back further than the town itself. Mara leaned over his shoulder. "These aren't public records," she said. "These were never filed." Jonah's voice came from behind them. "They erased them," he said. Thane looked up. Jonah stood at the entrance to the chamber, not coming closer. They took the land, Jonah continued. Took the people with it. His eyes moved across the papers and buried everything that proved it. Silence fell again, thicker this time. Ash froze, completely. His head tilted slightly, ears forward, listening. Thane saw it instantly. That shift, that moment. "What is it?" he whispered. Ash didn't move, didn't breathe loudly, didn't blink. Then, from somewhere deeper in the darkness, beyond the chamber, came a sound. Soft, faint. A knock. 1, 2, 3. Thane didn't move, didn't speak. The sound faded, leaving only the echo behind, and the certainty that they were not alone. The sound did not come again, but it did not need to. Once was enough. No one spoke at first. Inside the narrow stone chamber, the air felt heavier than before, as if the darkness itself had weight. Dust lingered in every breath, settling into the back of the throat, slow and suffocating. Thane Wilder stood still, listening, not just with his ears, but with the part of him that had learned long ago to recognize danger before it fully arrived. Ash had already moved. The German shepherd's body had shifted into something sharper, more focused. His ears were forward, locked toward the direction the sound had come from. His muscles tightened beneath his coat, not tense with fear, but coiled with purpose. He took a step forward, then another, toward the deeper passage. "Hold up," Sheriff Pike said, his voice low but firm. Thane didn't respond immediately. He was watching Ash, watching the way the dog's head dipped slightly, catching something in the air, the way his paws adjusted carefully, avoiding loose stones without needing to look. This wasn't instinct alone. This was training, memory, recognition. Mara stepped closer to Thane. "If there's a second chamber," she said quietly, "it could be unstable." Thane nodded once. "I know." But he didn't move back. The passage beyond the chamber narrowed sharply. Stone walls pressed closer, the ceiling lowering enough that Thane had to angle his shoulders slightly to move through. The ground beneath them shifted from packed dirt to loose gravel, uneven and unpredictable. Ash moved ahead, carefully, every step placed with precision. Thane followed, not rushing, not hesitating. The darkness deepened as they moved further in. The light from behind them thinned, reduced to a faint gray glow that barely touched the walls anymore. Mara's flashlight cut through it in a narrow beam, catching dust and stone and the faint shimmer of moisture along the edges. Then, a sound. Faint. Different this time. Not a knock, a breath. Thane stopped. Ash froze. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered from behind. No one answered. They didn't need to. Ash moved again, faster now, more urgent. The passage opened slightly ahead. Not a full room, but enough space for something to exist. And it did. A collapse. Part of the ceiling had given way, spilling rock and dirt into a small chamber below. The debris formed a jagged slope, unstable and shifting with even the slightest pressure. And beneath it, a shape. Small. Still. "Noah," Mara breathed. Thane moved instantly, sliding down the loose edge, boots digging into unstable ground. Stones shifted beneath him, sliding, cracking, threatening to give way completely. Ash followed. Too fast. One of his paws slipped against a loose rock. His body dropped slightly, catching himself hard against the slope. A low sound escaped him. Not pain, not fully, but enough. Thane turned sharply. "Ash!" The dog steadied himself immediately. He didn't retreat, didn't hesitate. He moved forward again. Thane exhaled slowly. There it was. The moment. The one he knew too well. Ahead. The boy. Behind. The only partner who had never failed him. "Ash," Thane said, his voice low but firm. "Back." For a split second, the dog didn't move. His eyes locked on Thane. Not disobedient. Not confused. Waiting. The past pressed in, a different place. A different mission. A different voice in his ear. "Fall back." And he had listened. He had walked away. And someone had not come back. Thane's jaw tightened. His grip on the rope at his side tightened with it. "No," he said quietly. Ash moved forward. Together. They reached Noah. The boy was half buried beneath loose debris, his small body curled instinctively. Arms pulled in tight as if trying to protect himself from the weight above. His face was pale beneath a layer of dust. Eyes closed. Breathing shallow. But breathing. "I've got you," Thane said. More to himself than to the boy. Carefully, deliberately, he began clearing the debris. Each movement measured. Each stone tested before being shifted. Mara joined him, working quickly but precisely. Pike held the upper slope, bracing the unstable ground as best he could. Ash stayed close. Too close, maybe. But he didn't interfere. He watched. Every movement, every shift. Then, Noah stirred. A weak sound escaped him. Barely there. Thane leaned closer. "You're okay," he said, his voice steady. "You're not alone." The boy's eyes fluttered open, confused, disoriented. I heard something," Noah whispered. His voice was thin, fragile. "Someone was calling." Thane didn't answer that. He couldn't. As Thane shifted another stone, his hand brushed against the wall behind Noah. Rough, cold, marked. He turned his light toward it and saw the words, carved into the stone, uneven, shallow, but unmistakable. I was still here. The letters were small, child-sized, not written, scratched. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The weight of the stones, the sound of breathing, the presence of the others. All that remained was the realization. Clara had not died immediately. She had waited, and no one had come. Thane's chest tightened, sharp, deep, but he didn't stop moving. "Let's go," Mara said urgently. "We don't have time." He nodded once and kept going. Minutes stretched, or maybe seconds. Time lost its shape inside the dark. Finally, the last of the debris shifted. Thane slid an arm carefully beneath Noah, lifting him slowly, supporting his weight so nothing collapsed further. The boy winced, but stayed conscious. "I've got you," Thane repeated. Ash stepped closer. His nose brushed lightly against Noah's hand. A brief touch, grounding. Then they moved. Up the slope, carefully, slowly. Every step measured against the shifting ground. Pike steadied them from above, gripping Thane's arm when the stones slipped beneath his boots. Mara guided the light. Emily stood back, clearing space, her face pale but determined. And then, they were out. The air outside hit differently. Cooler, lighter, real. Noah coughed weakly, blinking against the sudden brightness. Lena's voice broke somewhere behind them. "My baby." She ran forward, dropping to her knees as Thane lowered Noah gently onto the grass. Her hands trembled as she touched his face, his shoulders, as if needing to confirm he was still there. Thane stepped back. Just one step. Ash didn't. He stayed close, watching, quiet. No one spoke for a moment. No one needed to. Then, Ash moved. Not toward Noah, not toward Thane, back toward the chapel. The leash tightened in Thane's hand. He looked down, then followed. Inside, the light had shifted again. Softer now. Longer shadows stretching across the floor. Ash walked directly to the center, to the place where the floor had been disturbed before. He began to dig. Fast, focused, relentless. "Hey," Thane started, then stopped. Ash wasn't reacting. He was searching. The wood beneath gave way again, faster this time, as if it had already been weakened. Thane dropped beside him, helped clear the opening. Beneath, a small cavity. Inside it, a metal box. Rust along the edges, but intact. Thane lifted it carefully, turned it in his hands, and saw the name scratched into the surface. Clara Wren. The weight of it settled into his grip. Not heavy, but impossible to ignore. Ash sat beside him, still, watching. This time, he did not look toward the forest. He looked at the box. The box was colder than it should have been. Not from the air, from what it carried. Thane sat on the worn wooden step just outside the chapel, the metal box resting in his hands. Rust had eaten into its corners, but the lid still held. The name scratched into its surface. Clara Wren. Caught the light in faint, uneven lines. Ash sat beside him. Not restless, not alert, just present. The kind of stillness that came after something important had already happened. Mara crouched across from Thane, brushing dirt from her hands. "Open it," she said quietly. Not impatient, not demanding, just certain. Thane hesitated, not out of fear, out of respect. Then slowly he lifted the lid. Inside, layers, not random, placed. At the top were drawings, crude, uneven, made with the kind of pressure only a child would use. The paper was fragile, edges curled and browned with age. Most of them showed simple things: trees, small houses, the outline of the chapel. But some were different. Figures, small groups of people, standing together. No faces, just shapes. And one drawing, a circle, darkened, repeated over and over. Mara leaned closer. "She was trying to map something," she murmured. Beneath the drawings lay a folded letter. Thane unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was small, careful, forced into neatness, as if the writer had been trying to stay calm. "If someone finds this..." The words trailed slightly, as if the hand had paused. "They told us not to talk. They said it would make things worse." Thane's jaw tightened. But it's still here, under everything. A faint smudge marked the edge of the page. Dirt, or tears. I think they're afraid someone will find it again. The letter ended there. No name, no date. But it didn't need either. At the bottom of the box, a folded piece of paper, thicker than the rest. A map. Thane unfolded it slowly. It matched the one Elias had shown them. But this one was more detailed, more precise. The chapel was marked. The old cabin, the broken boundary lines, and behind the chapel, a section that had been darkened in, not crossed out, not erased, hidden. Mara inhaled slowly. "That's not just land," she said. "That's something they didn't want anyone to see." Ash stood. Suddenly, his head turned toward the back of the chapel, not tense, but drawn. Thane followed his gaze, then stood. "Let's go." The path behind the chapel was overgrown, not by accident, deliberately. Branches bent inward, Roots twisted across the ground in uneven patterns. The earth dipped slightly, then rose again, like something beneath it had shifted long ago and never fully settled. Ash moved ahead, slower this time, more careful. They reached it without knowing exactly when they had crossed into it. There was no marker, no sign, just a feeling. The ground flattened, the trees thinned, and the silence deepened. Mara stopped first, her breath caught just slightly. Ahead of them, stones, not random, not natural arranged. Small markers, uneven, some leaning, some broken, most barely visible beneath layers of moss and time. A graveyard, unmarked, no names, no dates, no recognition. Thane stepped forward slowly. His boots sank slightly into the soft earth. Ash stayed close now, not scanning, not searching, just staying. Elias Wren's voice broke the silence behind them. "I didn't know," he said. They turned. He stood at the edge of the clearing, his posture fragile but upright, as if something inside him had forced him to come here despite every instinct not to. His pale eyes moved across the stones, slowly, carefully, as if reading something no one else could see. "My sister," he whispered. He stepped forward, kneeling in front of one of the markers, not because he knew, but because he felt it. "They said she was lost," he continued, his voice trembling. "That the forest took her." His hand hovered over the stone, then rested against it, gentle. "She wasn't lost." The words were not loud, but they carried. "They buried her." Silence followed, not empty, full, of everything that had never been said. A voice cut through it, smooth, controlled. "People don't want truth." They turned. Victor Hale stood at the edge of the clearing. He did not look like he belonged there. Tall, straight-backed. His posture carried the kind of control that came from a life spent making decisions others followed. His dark coat fell cleanly along his frame, untouched by the dirt and decay around him. Beneath it, a black high-neck shirt, tailored trousers, polished boots, everything precise. His hair was dark, neatly styled, touched faintly with silver at the temples. His face was sharp, composed, his expression unreadable in the way of someone who had practiced keeping it that way. His eyes, however, were not empty. They were certain. "They want peace," Victor finished. Sheriff Pike stepped forward. "This land isn't open for development," he said firmly. Victor's gaze shifted to him. "I'm not here to build anything," he replied calmly. His eyes moved across the graves. Then back to Thane. "I'm here to stop you from making a mistake." Mara crossed her arms. "By hiding this?" Victor shook his head slightly. "No, by digging it up." He stepped closer, not aggressive, not hesitant. "This town survived because people chose to move forward," he said. His voice was steady, measured. "You start uncovering things like this, you don't get truth." A pause. "You get collapse." Thane met his gaze. "And what do you call this?" he asked quietly. Victor followed his line of sight. The graves, the silence, the weight of it. He didn't answer immediately. "History," he said finally. "No," Thane replied. He looked down at the ground, at the place where names should have been. "This is what happens when no one comes back." Victor's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did, just slightly. "Sometimes," Victor said, "not coming back is the only reason anything else survives." Elias let out a broken breath. "Survives for who?" he asked. Victor didn't answer. He didn't need to. The question hung there, unresolved. The forest felt different now. Not just heavy, divided. Mara looked at Thane, then at Pike, then back at the graves. "This doesn't go away," she said. Pike nodded slowly. "No," he agreed. Victor turned, stepping back toward the trees. "You'll regret this," he said. Not as a threat, as a certainty. Then he was gone. The silence returned. But it wasn't the same. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of choice. Thane stood still for a long moment, then looked at Ash. The dog didn't look at the forest, didn't look at the graves. He looked at Thane, waiting, not for a command, for a decision. The town did not wake the same way anymore. Bright Hollow had always carried its silence like a habit, something worn comfortably over time. But now, that silence had edges. It moved differently. It lingered in conversations that stopped too soon, in glances that stayed a second too long. Truth had a way of doing that. It didn't shout, it shifted. The meeting was held in the old community hall, a long, rectangular building with white-painted walls that had yellowed over the years, and wooden floors worn smooth by decades of footsteps. Folding chairs filled the space, uneven rows facing a small raised platform at the front. People came, not because they wanted to, because they couldn't ignore it anymore. Thane stood near the back, arms crossed loosely, posture still, eyes moving across the room without drawing attention to it. He wore the same olive jacket, the same worn boots, the same quiet presence that made people instinctively lower their voices around him. Ash sat beside him, calm, unmoving, watching. Mara stood at the front. She didn't belong behind a podium, but she held her ground anyway. Her moss-green jacket caught the overhead light, her posture steady, her expression composed but not detached. "This isn't speculation," she said. "We've found physical evidence, documents, a burial site." A murmur moved through the room. Not loud, uneasy. Sheriff Pike stood just off to the side, arms folded. His presence wasn't there to intimidate. It was there to hold the line. His square face was unreadable, but his stance made one thing clear. This wasn't going away. Elias Wren stepped forward, slowly, carefully, as if each step carried weight beyond his years. The room quieted without being asked. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at the floor, then up. "My sister," he began, his voice steady but thin, "was not lost." The words landed harder than anyone expected. Elias was not a man who spoke often. When he did, it carried the quiet gravity of something long buried. "She didn't disappear," he continued. "She was there, the whole time." A breath. They knew. The room shifted, not physically, emotionally. "They told us not to look," Elias said, "not to ask questions. They said it was better that way." He paused. His hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the release of something held too long. "It wasn't better." A voice from the crowd spoke up. "You're saying the town just let this happen?" The speaker was a man in his 50s, lean, sharp-featured, with restless eyes and a permanent crease between his brows. His name was Daniel Harrow. He owned the hardware store, known for speaking quickly and thinking even faster, rarely stopping to consider how his words landed. "That people knew and said nothing?" Elias met his gaze. "Yes." The word didn't rise. It settled. Another murmur, louder this time. Victor Hale stood near the far wall. He hadn't been invited. He didn't need to be. His posture was as composed as ever, straight-backed, hands resting lightly at his sides, his dark coat clean against the worn interior of the hall. His expression remained calm, controlled, but his eyes moved constantly, reading the room, calculating. "This isn't going to help anyone," Victor said. His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. People turned, some in agreement, some in quiet resistance. Mara stepped forward. "It's already helping," she said. Victor tilted his head slightly. "By dividing the town?" Sheriff Pike spoke then. "Truth isn't what divides people," he said. Victor's gaze shifted to him. "No," he replied. "It's what happens after." Silence, not agreement, not rejection, something in between. Thane didn't move, didn't speak, but he watched. The room, the people, the way some leaned forward, the way others leaned back. The fracture line was already there. It had been for years. Now, it was just visible. The meeting ended without resolution. There was no vote, no conclusion. Just people leaving in quiet clusters, carrying pieces of the truth with them like something fragile. Outside, the air felt different, clearer, but colder. Noah stood near the edge of the building. He looked smaller now, not physically, but in the way children do after they've seen something they don't fully understand. Thane walked over. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Noah shrugged slightly. His eyes drifted toward the forest. "I keep thinking about it," he said quietly. "About what?" Noah hesitated then. "The sound," he said. Thane didn't press. "It didn't feel scary," Noah added. "Just like someone didn't want to be alone." Thane nodded once. He understood that feeling. More than he wanted to. Mara approached from behind. "They're going to try to shut this down," she said quietly. Thane glanced at her. "Victor?" She nodded. "And others." Thane looked back toward the forest. The chapel. The place where it had all started. "Then we don't let them," he said. Later that evening, as the light faded into soft amber across the trees, Thane returned to the chapel alone. Ash followed. Not ahead, not behind. Beside him. Inside, the air was still. The broken light from the stained glass had shifted into darker tones now. Deep reds and muted blues stretching across the floor like fading memories. Ash stopped near the center. Sat. Didn't move. Thane didn't speak. He didn't need to. He moved to the opening, to the place beneath the floor. Then he climbed down. The tunnel felt smaller now, not physically, but in the way memory tightens around space. He moved slowly, carefully, until he reached the wall. The words were still there, rough, uneven, unfinished. "I was still here." Thane reached out, placed his hand against the stone. No one saw him. No one heard him. But something in his chest shifted, not healed, not erased, just answered. He stood there for a long time, then turned, climbed back up. Ash was waiting, exactly where he had been. They left together. The next morning, the forest was quiet again, but it was no longer the same quiet. Noah stood at the edge of the clearing behind the chapel, alone. He held something small in his hand, a stone. He walked slowly to one of the unmarked graves, not knowing which one, not needing to. He knelt, placed the stone gently on the earth, then stood, didn't say anything, didn't look back. Ash sat nearby, still, watching, not guarding, not searching, just present. Thane stood a few steps away, hands at his sides, breathing steady. The forest moved around them, light shifting through the trees, wind brushing softly against leaves. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just something different. Not everything had been fixed, not everything had been made right. But something had changed. Something had been seen. Something had been named. And that mattered. Thane looked at Ash, then at the trees, then at the place where the past had finally been allowed to exist. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was standing outside of it. He was part of it. And maybe that was enough. Not everything had been repaired. But for the first time, it had been remembered the right way. There are places in this world where the truth is buried so deeply that people begin to believe it no longer exists. But sometimes, God does not remove the darkness. He sends a light into it, not always in the form we expect, not always loud, not always miraculous in the way stories make it seem. Sometimes that light is a quiet man who chooses to come back when he once walked away. Sometimes it is a loyal dog who refuses to ignore what others cannot see. And sometimes it is a child who unknowingly carries the courage to step where others were too afraid to go. What happened in that forest was not just about uncovering the past. It was about something deeper. The reminder that no life is ever truly forgotten in the eyes of God. That even when people turn away, even when silence covers the truth, there is always a way for it to rise again, in the right time, through the right hands. Maybe you have something in your own life that feels buried. A regret, a memory, a moment you wish you could go back to. This story is a reminder that it is never too late to return, never too late to do what is right, never too late to honor what was left behind. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from, or what part of the story stayed with you the most, and if you believe in stories that carry meaning, healing, and faith. Consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next one. May God watch over you and your family. May He give you peace in your quiet moments, strength in your difficult ones, and the courage to return to what truly matters.